9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Shane Walsh, welcome to the Collective Fitness Podcast, my man. How are you, buds?
I am very good, mate. How are you?
I'm very well. It has been a rough journey to try and get this podcast working for the past 15 minutes because of our lousy internet, but we are here. So, do you want to give everyone the quick little 101 on you, who you are, what you do, what your business is, and what your role is within the fitness industry?
I will try to keep this as brief as possible. So I am an online coach based over in Dublin in Ireland. I am the host of the Shane Walsh Fitness podcast, which is up on iTunes and Spotify. I've been so lucky to have the likes of Connor on, Jay Alderton, Siobhan Hagan, Sinead Haggerty, Paul Morris, Darren Cartel. Like it's a little bit scary with some of the names that come on. I specialise predominantly in female fat loss. That was a completely accidental niche, and there's some questions that Connor has for myself, which we'll be talking about to help some girls around certain different things around that, cravings and stuff. MNU Nutritionist. So yeah, I've been doing this for probably about nearly 2.5 years at this stage. I've been self-employed for about 2.5 years, worked in recruitment sales for 5 years before that, and absolutely hated every minute of it. I got sick in 2017, and had to make a life change and decided to look after myself and put myself first. And then here we are on the 9th of the 9th, 2020, still looking after myself.
What was the illness? Do you mind me asking?
No, it's no problem. I'm so honest about it. So I had started a new job in recruitment in April 2017 on the Monday. And then on the Saturday morning, I woke up with 2 blood clots in my left arm. So there was one here. They couldn't find this one unless my arm was completely straight.
Yeah.
And then there was one kind of like the opposite side of the elbow.
Yeah.
And my arm had completely ballooned up, fluid in the elbows. Fingers were really, really swollen. There's a rash. And then they had no idea. I saw so many specialists. I was on a bed for about 15, 16 hours. Drove myself to hospital. Not the smartest thing I've ever done in my life. And then had to get surgery. Veins opened up. And then 2 weeks later, went back into work because work were being assholes about it.
Yeah.
And went back in at 8:30 in the morning. By 9 o'clock, I'd collapsed on the floor with fluid in my lungs.
No way. That is a story. I've followed you for a good while now. Followed you for over about 12 months. I've actively watched all your stuff. That's not a story that I know. That's really interesting. So what was you, just because of your lack of health at the time, or?
Yeah, like I wouldn't say I was kind of one of those normal lads that kind of liked a night out.
Yeah.
And I wasn't into recreational drugs. I've never done drugs in my life. Was kind of just boozing and partying, not really looking after myself. I used to play football. Stopped playing football at about 26. So I just got fed up with that whole scene and just started not looking after myself. And yeah, eventually just my body was my body. There was never a reason given, but I took it as a sign of that I was just generally unhappy and I just needed something to change. And wasn't the greatest way for things to change, but I say it was the scariest time that ever happened, but also the reason why I'm doing this today. My motto is everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, cool. Okay, cool. So let's circle it back. You're a coach, an online coach. For you, what makes a good coach? Be it in person, be it online, be it coaching people how to walk their dog, or be it coaching people in the fitness industry. Ultimately, what skills and do you think that you require to be a good coach, and how does that look for you?
I think the biggest thing that most people need as a good coach is empathy. I think a lot of coaches, from working with coaches, from having had coaches myself, the biggest thing that a lot of people in the industry potentially lack is a little bit of empathy. I think if you are potentially from a bro background or a bodybuilding background, it's not that it's easier for you. You've just done a little bit more reps in kind of like your own training, and you don't understand why, say, Mary down the road isn't that interested in looking like that or anything like that. And it's important to show that you actually care, understand the person, take the time to actually know the person, get to know their family names, and kind of actually make an effort to actually check in with them. I think too many coaches, especially online coaches, can see an online coach thing as a way of it being easier than doing face-to-face. but like the hours can be a little bit less than face to face, but it is a little bit more tricky with online coaching
Yeah.
because people can hide behind a phone.
Yeah.
So I will always make sure if I get a text message, about 80%, 90% of the time, I will voice note back. So because
Yeah.
you can, it's like when you get an email and it's taken up the wrong way. So you're better off giving it as your voice because they can pick up the tone if you're being serious or if there's a little bit of empathy be given in. And I think the other thing is most coaches don't stay in their lane.
Yeah.
I think most coaches, I was talking to someone who is a T1 diabetic who specializes in type 1 diabetics or people with diabetes. And he has had some horror stories from some of his clients, and they are told to do certain things with carbohydrates and messing them around with type 1 diabetes. It's life or death.
Yeah.
That's literally what it is. And then too many people will literally Google an answer and then give that to their clients. It's about doing proper research, having a brain, and don't be afraid to refer out. And I'm definitely staying in your lane.
Yeah, I think there's been a big shift recently, and I think this is amongst most industries. Like, we also live in the business world. Naturally, we do because of being self-employed and so on and so forth. And I think one of the main things that I've noticed now is that, like, even people coming at this from like a business mastermind standpoint, all those people in that world, even them, where they had this ruthless like entrepreneurship, hustle, hard work, and all this shit, it's really starting to change now and starting to shift away from that. And I think especially in the fitness industry as well, like now even more so, we're starting to move away from this kind of like aesthetics only world, and that Karen, who's 35 and got 2 kids and leads that normal lifestyle, doesn't need to be heavy dieting and be shredded and so on and so forth. And especially with now in the fitness industry as well, people are starting to realize that, you've got Karen, who's 35, she's got 3 kids. Like, she doesn't need to be so aesthetically driven. She doesn't need to be constantly focusing on how she looks in the mirror and what she looks like. And what she needs to be doing is looking at how functional she can be for the rest of her life, and how she can do her life as best as she can. And I think, like you said, mate, I think like for you, someone who's successful in what you do, like empathy is the main thing. And I think there's also been that big shift towards it now as well, which is really an amazing thing to see. One of the things you said in your little 101 on you is you spoke about MNU.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about what it is and why MNU is so good, and why that's like a title that you want to stick against yourself.
So MNU is a course started up by Martin McDonald, who's the face of it, and Sarah Duff has a lot to do with it as well. It's an evidence-based nutrition course, and it's mainly online. So it's 1 year long, and you've got fully online, or else you can do workshops, which are really, really handy as well if you want to do that. You've got guest lectures coming in to talk about hydration. There's variable. It kind of removes the bullshit from nutrition, and it's all evidence based. It has changed the way a lot of nutritionists, a lot of PTs, a lot of practitioners have approached their coaching. There's also an element of how to actually coach the person rather than just saying, this is the only way to do something, example, keto. So it's really, really important to make sure that this was something that Martin wanted to grow. It was something that he's very, very passionate about. And that definitely comes across. And when he is talking to you, as he does the lectures himself, but there's also the accountability that you've got your exams at the end. And the exams are so tough. They nearly kill you, but they're amazing, and the support that the guys give you. And then you've got your graduation, you've got meetups, and MNU. I've made friends out of MNU. I meet up with them before COVID, obviously, and 2 meter rule during COVID. But I've met an awful lot of people. It's like a community, and it's a good community that you can bounce ideas off something. And if you say something or you're unsure of something, you can pop a message into that kind of group and you can bounce ideas off. So it's an incredible course, and anyone that's doing it or wants to do it, I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah. So it's like, from what I can see from the outside looking in, the MNU is a massively evidence-based way of practicing, am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah, 100%.
So like, there's been a massive shift towards that now. though we are starting to live in an industry where everything needs to be a little bit more evidence-based. And, and like, you can understand why the industry has been such a weird place over the past couple of years, where people have made this massive shift from like, who do I listen to? Who is saying the correct information that I can get my education from, and learn that and apply that to my clients? So why do you think the industry was so unevidence based and lacked the guidance that ultimately we should have had?
I think the biggest thing was that we didn't challenge the people at potentially the top. We just believed what they said was the truth. The perfect example would be kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger. We believed that we had to only have a certain amount of protein, or we could only eat protein, or there would be other people in the industry that you just wouldn't challenge. But now with the kind of the likes of social media, the likes of Facebook, the likes of Instagram, so many more people are putting out the research. A lot more
Yeah.
people were kind of like an information generation, in that people are getting taught the proper stuff. People are actually researching the stuff. And we seem to be in a generation where we actually want to change stuff. So that we'll go out of our way to say, right, it's not like, I don't like the call out culture that's out there. I really don't like that.
Yeah.
But it's about looking at the information, saying, right, has this been tested in labs? Has this been tested on actual people rather than rats? Has this been tested in by non-funding? So the perfect example is there's a study, like for growing up, you probably would have had this as well, Connor, when you're told breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Yeah.
That study was paid for by Kellogg's, which is the maker of cornflakes. So that has bias written all over it, but yet so many people believe it because it was said and no one challenged it. But then people went back into the lab and actually challenged it. That it's completely up to yourself if you want to have breakfast. If you're a bodybuilder, it would make more sense because you need to have a little bit more meals. If you're Jane and Mary down the road and you don't really necessarily like breakfast, you may not want to have something first thing in the morning at 7 or 8 o'clock. You may want to have something at say 10 or 11 o'clock. So there's that element of it as well. And I think there's a lot more money being put into the industry now as well, that the supplement companies looking to put out stuff. There's a lot more money being put out into doing expensive research. I think that's why it's changed as well. Potentially the money beforehand wasn't there because people will challenge things if they think things aren't going to be right.
Yeah, I was having a conversation a couple of days ago actually, and what I said was that like this whole bodybuilding industry, where it's a really like it's like a small subsection of the wider fitness industry. So let's say, for example, the bodybuilding part of the fitness industry only really takes up about 10% of the wider industry, but because sex sells, that means that the lens that which people view the fitness industry through is not purely, but majoritively like through that lens of like the bodybuilding world and the bodybuilding industry, which kind of puts it in this weird position where all the leaders within that small little subsection, all the people talking, like you said, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers of the world, and what's that guy called, the strength sensei? I forgot his name now, his actual name. But like these people were perceived as the authority because the media and social media and that lens upon which we viewed the fitness industry and the fitness and the health space was viewed through that lens of bodybuilding, which meant these guys who, a lot of them are, what's the polite way of putting this, under the influence of certain performance enhancing drugs, we looked at them as like the authority. And what I find is that, like you just said, is that we didn't challenge them because they looked the way they did and because the experience and the success they'd had with their guys. Everybody just took it as like, okay, cool, this must be correct. And I think now we're really starting to move away from that. And I think that big shift away from aesthetics, more towards health at every size, performance, living in line with the context of your life, not just trying to constantly strive for a six pack. I think this world now, like, is also encouraging that change where actually maybe we stop listening to those guys and we start listening to the guys like Martin, who runs MNU, who now have this wealth of evidence-based knowledge that we can listen to.
100%. And like, I think sometimes it can be easy to get bogged down in the evidence-based stuff as well. And like sometimes the evidence-based stuff isn't completely correct either. And it's sometimes you have to take into account people's preferences and people's choice. So they may not want to do intermittent fasting. They may not want to go keto, or they may want to go keto, but it's ultimately what behaviors they can stick to, what they can adhere to over a long term, which has to be taken into account as well. There's no point in ramming down this lab test down your clients' throats if they can't actually live by it day to day, because life is too short to be on this miserable diet. And I heard an interview with Danny Lennon from Sigma Nutrition, and he had some guy on, I think it was about 6 months ago, I would say, and he was saying, when you're picking your diet, ask yourself, can you see yourself doing this in 10 years? And more often than not, people will always go for these quick fixes, and they can't see themselves doing it in 10 years.
That's one thing I always say to my clients: if you can't do it for a year, don't do it for a day. That's something I love to say. Like, I ram that down my clients' throats, and it's really simple, but it massively changes people's perspective, because people look at their goals. So let's say I'm going on holiday in 6 months' time. They look at fitness through the lens of those 6 months. Well, actually, fitness is a big thing that should be a part of our everyday lives. And our health needs to be a priority no matter what we've got going on in our lives. So doing things in the quickest possible time shouldn't always be the priority. It should be, how do we implement it successfully over a longer period of time that's going to point us in the direction of where we kind of need to go. So that's kind of like leads me into the next question quite nicely. Why do you think it has shifted back to evidence-based? I know we just spoke about this correctly. I spoke about this a little bit, sorry. But why do you think now we're in this place where, like, all the people like your Martins of the world and your James Smiths of the world, who are purely evidence-based, are now starting to get the momentum that they deserved a long time ago?
I think the main reason is that they want to make themselves better practitioners themselves. They want to give the correct information to their clients as a duty of care. And I think if they can go that extra little bit of effort, they will stand out amongst the noise that's out there. Like, there are, like, I keep reverting back to keto, but there are keto zealots out there. But once you kind of challenge them on the actual science, like, there's still some people that don't believe that kind of weight loss and weight gain comes down to calories in, calories out. Like, and they think it's down to kind of insulin resistance, all this kind of stuff, which we will talk about in a little while. But it's important to say, right, if you have the information, how are you going to apply it to your clients? If you have the information, it's not about ramming it down the throat, which a lot of people do. If they, like, if you look at some Instagram accounts, I don't know, I'm picking this out of my head, like Keto Steve, it's about not being attached to a certain idea or a certain stigma. It's about kind of being a multicolored or multicultured lens that you want to actually be a general practitioner rather than being honed in on one particular diet. And I think that's what people are trying to move people away from. The likes of certain brands, we'll call it Swimming World, and we will call it Weight Watchers, but it's moving people away from that kind of ideology that's this all or nothing, these sins, the language that's being used and stuff like that. I think people are just fed up with that crap that's being put out there.
Yeah. One of the things we always say is that if you find someone and they're trying to give you information, and number one, they haven't listened to you or your lifestyle, run a mile. And number two, if you meet someone that's trying to give you information and they stick their flag in the ground next to one way and one method, and that's the only way they're trying to implement amongst people, run a mile. And I think that's like a good general rule of thumb. Like you just said, like, it's such a multi-dimensional concept, health and fitness is. So doing things any one way is generally not going to work. You've got to listen to the person and kind of break down that context. So why do you think fat loss is so complicated now? We kind of half answered that, but why do you think it's this complicated, massive thing that people struggle to even fathom, let alone know where to start?
I think there's so many different answers to this. I wrote it down. I've got like 6 or 7 things written down. And I think the most important thing is there's a bit of miseducation out there. I think particularly from working with females are so different to men when they're looking to lose weight. Men can diet for 4 weeks of the month. Women should only really diet for 2.
Yeah.
The week before and the week of, they need to probably increase their calories to deal with those cravings. And this changes with PCOS. This changes with endometriosis. I think so many people want to buy into like quick fixes. They're not prepared to do the work. They will look at these kind of like 6-week, 8-week launches and kind of plans and stuff like that and go for those. And then after they're finished, they're like, oh crap, I'm back to where I was 6 weeks later or 3 weeks later. Like, there's no aftercare. And it's I think a lot of people, I compare it to kind of like it's like saying to a homeless person that you need to work harder when someone is looking to lose weight. It's actually not that. It's you need to work a little bit smarter. It's not about being in the gym 6-7 days a week. It's potentially about kind of pausing. What can I adhere to? For busy moms, it's potentially going walking every single day. If you've got kids or you've got a dog, bring them out for a walk. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Resistance training 3 times a week. Trying to get plenty of veg and fruit into your diet. People almost think the things when you say, "Oh, get some plenty of fruit, protein, all this kind of stuff." They're like, "What's the catch? This seems too simple." People are looking for the
Yeah.
catches in that, but they're not looking for the catches when it comes to the likes of those slim boom bods, all that kind of rubbish that's out there. And I think the other thing a lot of people do is when they overcomplicate it, they over compare their results to other people's. People are scrolling all the time on social media and they're looking at, why is this person doing better than me? Why is this? You don't know where that person started from. You don't know where what dieting history they had. You don't know what approach they've taken to do that. And it's important to leave in the food you want and about kind of educating yourself from the right people, the likes of Martin, the likes of Danny Lennon, who may be a little bit advanced for some people, the likes of Ben Carpenter, who is amazing at
Yeah.
making the most complicated research in the world
Yeah.
into the simplest format. But it's like it's latching onto those ideologies and then not overcomplicating the whole message. It is more, there is more to it than calories in, calories out. We do have to move away from that message. Yes, calories in, calories out is kind of weight loss or weight gain or whatever it is, but there's a hell of a lot more to it. It has to be a little bit more psychological.
Yeah.
Dieting shouldn't be a death sentence. Dieting shouldn't be, unless you're like a bodybuilder, when you're doing prep and stuff like that, or doing a photo shoot, that's when it's going to be tired. But for John and Mary down the road, if you concentrate on getting your sleep in, plenty of water in, plenty of protein, a bit of veg, and try to actually relax and try to enjoy the process, it'll be an absolute game changer for you.
Yeah, this is where like it's a bit of a complicated one, because in one breath we say, don't get emotional about your diet. Don't attach emotions and psychological needs to your diet. Like, stop getting so emotional about keto. Stop getting so emotional about intermittent fasting. But then on the other hand, like, actually, it is a very emotional process, and it isn't as simple as calories in versus calories out. And there is massive psychological versus physiological needs and wants going on within that big cauldron of their life. And it's such like one of the, like what I was going to say when we were talking about online coaching at the start is that I think my personal training superpower is when I'm stood in front of someone and we are breaking down all the information that they need to know and what's going on in their life, and me asking them questions so that I can understand. I think one of the main things that I find is that I'm really good at seeing what is going on a psychological level. And I think that's something I'd always struggle with in online coaching. That's what I was going to mention. And this is why it's this, like, okay, on one side, we have all these guys that were getting super emotional about keto and intermittent fasting and this and that, and you need to do this. And on the other side, we've got the people who are completely getting unemotional about it, and they're like, it's just calories in versus calories out. Shut up, the rest of you. It's just calories in versus calories out. And I think there is a very middle ground to that. There's like, okay, we've got all these different options. You've got keto, calories in versus calories out, 800 calories a day, whatever it might be. We need to understand what is the base layer to that, what is actually happening. And for the majority of people, it's energy balance. And okay, which one of those diets now fits the best within your lifestyle? And by lifestyle, we mean taking into account all your psychological needs, all your physiological needs, and what on earth is going on between when you wake up in the morning and when you go to bed at night. Because those are all interchangeable variables that make it a hell of a lot more complicated than it should be.
100%. I couldn't agree more with that, because it is like the science would say it is the calories in, calories out, but you have to take in the actual person. It's called personal training for a reason.
Yeah.
And it has to be a personal approach to what that person can live by. Like for me or you, it's completely different from John and Mary down the road. Like not that we live and breathe what we do, but we want to push ourselves that little bit harder in the gym in order to kind of get strength or whatever. While John and Mary down the road may just want to be able to feel a little bit slimmer in their clothes, feel a bit more comfortable in their own skin, and maybe, especially busy moms, they don't put themselves first enough. And maybe this is the first time that they've actually put themselves first. And it's about understanding that psychological aspect from them as well, and nipping into that and kind of using that as a leverage, and kind of using that as their why. Why are they doing something? Why are they looking to feel a bit better about themselves? And more often than not, it's about trying to be a better version of themselves. And the latching onto that and using that with clients is an absolute game changer for me since I started using that kind of analogy with them. They latch onto that a little bit more, and they start to question when they have those down days. We all have down days. But one of my clients who came on the podcast, she came on and put it like, I didn't even pay her to say this. She goes, I just try to put one foot in front of the other each and every day. And I was like, that is so simple. But most people think, all right, I have to run a marathon today. No. What you need to do is take a pause back, listen to your body and say, right, did I sleep great last night? No. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try and raise my energy by either having a nap, or I'm going to try and raise my energy by having a walk. I'm going to try and raise my energy by potentially ringing a friend and go out for a walk, or whatever it may be. And then focusing, getting your sleep and staying off my phone that day. It's about trying to make small little wins along the way, and that will lead to consistency. And that consistency buzzword, people overcomplicate consistency.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, humans are very, 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 very A to Z thinkers. We are at A, we need to get to Z, and we just forget about the B's, the C's, the D's of the world, and we forget about all those little things we've got to do in between. So like you said, like, instead of thinking about putting our foot in front of the other, we think about the marathon. And then for some people who could benefit from fitness and exercise, they look at the marathon and they get daunted and they don't even start. And then you got the other people who look at the marathon, they only look at the marathon, which ultimately, for a large portion of them, sometimes ends in failure. So it's that really kind of weird paradox. We actually need to focus on putting one foot in front of the other and celebrating those small wins along the way. So let's say I've just signed up with you. I need to lose a load of weight. For you, what's the starting point? Like, what is that step-by-step process for weight loss?
So the biggest thing for myself is I have a questionnaire that I will send over to people in order to fill in. And it's probably like 20, 25 questions, and it makes you think. And whoever fills it in is kind of like, Jesus, I didn't realize that I was kind of had those eating patterns.
Yeah.
It questions where they're hungrier, where their energy levels are, their dieting history, any injuries, that kind of side of things. It's about getting to know the person. So then I will have a welcome call, as I call it, with them. Maybe 40 minutes to an hour of getting to know them, understand their psychology, what they've tried, why it didn't work for them, and understanding why they want to do this. And it's really, really important to understand each client. Every single person is so, so different. That has been the biggest game changer since I started doing this. I'll hold my hands up to this. When I first started, I was like, here's your generic plan. This is going to fit every single person. That's not what this is about. Yes, there can be generic plans, but when it comes to the nutrition and the mindset stuff, it's about understanding the actual psychological barriers. You can also look at changing their sleep patterns, trying to take the phone out of the room. Because if you're not getting enough sleep, your hunger hormones can go into overdrive and your fullness hormone can sink down, hence why you're reaching for less nutritious food. It's important to try and look at their meals. Where can you tweak their meals? Start off with potentially looking at their breakfast or their lunch. Are they going from say, with lockdown, people are working 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 9 p.m. or whatever it may be. And it's about trying to stay consistent and say, right, I'm going to have my 3 meals a day. And that's nothing to do with your metabolism at all. It's trying to create a routine for you where you can get your protein in. So you're not kind of really, really hungry late in the evenings where you're just going to graze. It's about identifying your triggers. Are you eating when you're a little bit emotional? Are you eating a little bit more when you're kind of coming up to your cycle, when you have those cravings, which we'll speak about in a little while? And understanding that and trying to educate them by making small little tweaks and not trying to pull the rug from underneath your client, because they have probably had the rug pulled from under them so many times with so many different diets. And it's about kind of interpreting what can you tweak and trying to make it a lifestyle rather than a death sentence.
That's a good, like, I suppose when I asked that question, what I anticipated for you to go, okay, we take the calories and we do this and we do this. But I think that's really important because it highlighted how much of a tricky but important process the whole understanding of the individual person's lifestyle is. And this is why, like, when I talk to someone who has just downloaded a nutrition plan off the internet, or they've seen this stupid documentary on Channel 4 about eating a certain amount of calories per day, and you're just like, oh, it's not about that. You need to look at your lifestyle and look at what the challenges you are facing that has helped you get to this position. And ultimately, like, I did a call video a couple of weeks ago for some of my clients, and what I said is that sometimes goals aren't actually the goal. The only difference between you now and the you that is 4 stone lighter is the difference in the habits and behaviors between those two people. And ultimately, so the goal points you in the right direction, but the habits and behaviors are ultimately the goal, because they're what are going to get you to the goal and keep you there for that longer period of time. And ultimately, the lack of those habits and behaviors are sometimes what has led us to put this weight on in the first place. So by not addressing any of your habits and behaviors in your life and just doing this silly plan that puts you on a stupidly low amount of calories and is going to make you unhappy for a long period of time, it just doesn't solve the problem. All you've done is kind of tortured yourself for like a short period of your year, which is ultimately time that would be better spent elsewhere. Cool. So I've got a list of subjects I want to go through now, and I want to kind of rapid fire them at you. Give me a paragraph or so of an answer, but by all means, if you want to go into it a little bit more, let's go into it a little bit more. So, starvation mode, what is it?
So, starvation mode is the idea that they eat too little to lose weight. So, there was a study by Ansel Keys in 1945 where they did a 24-week starvation phase, and they lowered their calories a lot. And this caused, on average, about a 25% weight loss, or total body weight loss, for those people that took part. And then they renourished them afterwards. So, from a physiological level, it isn't true.
Yeah.
But from a psychological point of view, it can be a thing that can have a massive impact. It can increase binging, and it can increase that side of things, and the behavioral side of things. There's no such thing as eating too little for your body, but it's really, really important to understand that you need to, like, what I'm saying now is I wouldn't encourage someone to adopt an 800 calorie diet, is what that from that Channel 4 documentary. What people need to tolerate and people need to find is their sweet point where they can actually find where they can live by, and not just reach for these 1200, 800 calorie diets for the quick fixes. Starvation mode is a thing, but from a physiological point of view, it ain't true.
Yeah. Protein consumption.
So there is no upper limit. So there is, a lot of people think that if you can only have 30 grams, you can only consume 30 grams of protein per meal, which is complete another horse manure. Intermittent fasting wouldn't work if that was the basic premise.
Yeah.
Protein consumption, it comes into variables, and a lot of variables kind of come into it, like age, gender, activity, health, diet, massively come into play. It's based on your weight. For most adults with minimal activity, I would advise 0.8 grams per kg of body weight. If you are resistance training or going to the gym or exercising, I would encourage 1.2 grams to 1.7 grams per kg of body weight. And there are also studies showing that some athletes are consuming 3.5 grams per kg of body weight. It's about trying to eat protein with each meal. If, for instance, you have 10 grams of protein with your breakfast and don't eat for the rest of the day, and you have 50 or 60 grams with your dinner, it's not going to make a massive impact. It's also, unless you have an underlying kidney issue, it's not going to have a detrimental impact on your kidneys, which a lot of people think as well. Protein will not make you bulky, girls, if you're listening to this as well, by the way.
Yeah. It's a bit of a funny one, isn't it, protein? Because it's got such a bad rap, and I think there's just a misconception between protein synthesis and muscle protein synthesis. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, muscle protein synthesis does have that upper limit, does it not? But then the wider protein consumption will filter into protein synthesis throughout the whole body.
So there isn't a cutoff point. It's about kind of like if you're doing kind of bodybuilding and stuff like that, you need to kind of keep topping it up.
Yeah.
It's like a glass of water. You need to keep topping it up every so often. It's a little bit different for people who are looking to lose weight. The most important thing for the protein and stuff like that, it's harder to digest, so it actually burns a little bit more calories in your body. I hate using food as a way of burning calories. There's a bigger thermic effect of food.
Yeah.
And it's also keeps you fuller for longer. So a lot of people forget that. So if you are like having cravings, protein and fruit are going to be your friends.
Sugar makes you fat.
This one hurts my soul.
Give it to me.
It doesn't make you fat. What it comes down to is your calories in, calories out, unfortunately. But there's been studies done over in America. So we know that there is an obesity crisis at the minute, unfortunately. There was studies done that obesity is on the rise and that 80% of Americans don't eat enough fruit or veg. So those people who are obese, 80% of those don't eat enough fruit or veg. 70% of those don't eat fruit. About 50 to 60% of those don't, or they exceed their amounts of fat that they eat. Fats are not bad for you, by the way. And less than 50% of those don't exercise enough. Nowhere in that study has sugar been the cause of their obesity.
Yeah.
It's literally coming into not finding a balance that works for them and leaning on certain food groups more so than others. The sugar thing kind of comes into it as well with kind of like the artificial sweeteners. Like people worry about artificial sweeteners in like the Diet Cokes or the Diet 7-Ups or Diet Sprites, whatever it may be. But then they'll go out in the pints and it's kind of like counterintuitive. You have to have a stupid amount of sweeteners. Like, I mean, a bonkers amount of sweeteners for it to be detrimental to your health. So don't sweat the small stuff. Everything in moderation and you will be fine.
Okay, amazing. So moving on to the final one. Can you lose weight whilst eating junk food?
The quick answer is yes.
Cool.
Would I advise it? No. You want to try and get some minerals and vitamins into you as well in order to kind of keep your body satiated through kind of getting decent amounts of protein. But you from getting fruit and veg, which I think a lot of people undervalue and underrate for keeping them full as well. It's also a way to fill up your plate. We eat with our eyes.
Yeah.
And if we see a big massive portion of vegetables and stuff like that on a plate, you're probably going to be a little bit more fuller. You can definitely lose weight off eating just junk food, but your energy levels will be lousy. Your bowels and digestive system will not be amazing. Your mood will be quite lethargic. So I would not advise it.
It's such a precarious thing, isn't it? Because we talk about calories in versus calories out, but then on the other hand, we're like, okay, cool. No, you need to eat your fruit and veg. Like, don't just go and eat junk food. Even though we've told you calories in versus calories out, it's really simple. We still need to go and eat your vitamins and minerals through your fruit and veg. And there's such a psychological aspect to that whole side of the junk food world, where like that dopamine reinforcements that but encourages us to go and eat that Big Mac or eat that burger or whatever it is. And the same is said for alcohol. Like there's that dopamine release that encourages that process of going and having the beer or whatever. And it's like a really precarious thing because yes, it's all well and good me telling you to go and eat your fruit and veg, but then there's that massive psychological aspect and these companies know that, don't they? They know that that the impact they are having on people and their marketing tactics to get people to eat the food.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's something definitely needs to change with the way they label stuff because the labels at the minute are only per 100 grams. So when people are measuring out their portions, they're definitely a hell of a lot more than 100 grams of something. And then most people think that they've probably only eaten about 200 or 300 calories, and it's probably more than like 600, 700, 800 calories. And that is where the education has to start. It is easier to go for the junk food, but I know myself from who has come from potentially looking for the junk food when I was hungover and stuff. I know when I have it now, I don't feel amazing. My energy levels are quite low and my stomach doesn't really like it. So I value getting decent wholesome foods into my body a lot more, and my energy and my capacity to actually function as a human, I value that more than reaching for the junk food. I'm not saying it's bad, but I just don't value it.
Yeah, cool. And this leads us nicely into one of my next questions about cravings. I think this is something that we all suffer with. Loads of my clients suffer with it. I suffer with it. I'm sure you suffer with it as well. And I recently caught one of your social media posts talking all about it, and I found it really interesting. So can you go a little bit into cravings and how people can manage that and where the workarounds and the band-aids are within the context of cravings?
Yeah, so cravings is the wormhole. For women in particular, I think it's a little bit different, a little bit more difficult. And I think we all get them. We all got them. I got them when I've done photo shoots and stuff like that. And I didn't enjoy having those cravings. But what I would encourage someone to do is, if you are a girl listening to this, would be to identify where you are on your certain times of your cycle. So there's an app called Clue, which will count your, or will look at your cycle and kind of looking at where you are at certain times of the month. It could be second week of your cycle, could be third week of your cycle, could be fourth week of your cycle where you get your cravings, and identifying where you may need to increase your food. For a lot of girls, it's generally the week before and the week of where they need to increase their food. So what I mean by increasing your food, that doesn't mean just kind of eat for the sake of eating. So for example, if Amanda down the road is on, say, 1,600 calories a day, what I generally encourage a week before and a week of, I would encourage to have about 200 calories extra. So bring your total up to 1,800 calories a day. The reason for that is, if you think of, say, me trying to drive from London to Newcastle on half a tank of petrol, that's essentially what you're doing to your body. You need to top it up with the right fuel. What's not going to help you with those cravings is a load of carbohydrates. So caveat, carbohydrates are not evil. But what carbohydrates can do is they can spike up your sugar levels, and then they can crash back down, and then you're hungry 2 seconds later. So what the research would say is that you need to probably focus on the likes of fruit, like blueberries, blackberries. And there's a quick recipe that I use with my girls, is get a bit of Greek yogurt, throw in a bit of blueberries, blackberries, throw in 2 squares of dark chocolate, which I value my life too much to take away from girls, is leave the food in you enjoy around this time. Throw in a bit of flax seeds and chia seeds, and then you're getting your fiber, your calcium, your magnesium, you're getting your berries and your sugar hit. The fruit will help to regulate your sugar levels. You won't have as much of a spike, and you won't have as much as a crash, so you won't be hungry 2 seconds later. You need to increase your protein around this time as well, but every single girl is different. And some girls can have really, really intense cravings, but it's about identifying, is it actually cravings? And if you are extreme cravings, there's something up with your lifestyle. So
Yeah.
you need to look at, are you being run around like a lunatic? Are you working a silly, stressful job? Are you not looking after yourself? If you're putting extra stress on your body, your cravings, your PMS, all that kind of stuff are going to take its toll. You're not looking after yourself properly, and your body has a funny way of regulating itself. It's also really, really important with the cravings and stuff like that to understand that you may need to push yourselves a little bit harder at certain times of the week or times of the month as well. Mainly, generally the week before, depends. Every single girl is different, and managing those cravings has been an incredible game changer for a lot of the girls. And knowing that potentially they won't be mentally amazing that week, and identifying and doing a little bit of journaling can definitely help with that side of stuff, and saying, do I actually want this food or do I need this food? And then ask yourself, are you 7 out of 10 hungry? And if you're 7 out of 10 hungry, well then by all means go for it. But going for really, really high carbohydrate foods, I would not encourage it.
Yeah. I had Hailey Madigan on the podcast.
She's awesome.
Yeah, she's amazing. Some time ago now, and we had a similar train of conversation on that episode. And one of the things I said to her, I was like, "You've got to take your hat off to women." I was like, the amount of lack of consistency from week to week that they have to figure out due around their cycle, taking into account their emotions and their cravings and their calorie intake. And then you got to layer on top of that what they have to deal with on a daily basis, in terms of, I might be sat in a job interview and I may have massive amounts of cravings, or I'm on that part of my menstrual cycle. And it's just, you have got to take your hat off to females, and especially those females who really do kind of commit themselves to these diets and these fitness regimes where they're like, okay, cool, I've now got to do all the stuff that the men's got to do, but now I've got to worry about all this other stuff to do my menstrual cycle on top of that. So last topic, which leans in from that topic of conversation around the female, PCOS. I know it's quite common, more common than people think. Tell me all about it and how it affects females, and what we can ultimately do to help that situation.
So I think it affects 1 in 10 women. So it's 10% of total women have PCOS. So the cause is unknown, but it's very, very prevalent in those women who are overweight. Probably about 80% of women who are overweight potentially have it. They also may not recognize that they have it. So some of the signs and some of the symptoms can be irregular periods. So probably a normal period would be anywhere between 28 to 32, 33 days. Could really have a heavy flow or heavy bleed as well. You could have a little bit more testosterone, so which leads to hair growth. Could have a little bit more acne, can lead to weight gain, can really, really have an impact. And then you also have headaches as well. The kind of the diagnosis is kind of like it's the number of cysts on your ovaries. It's kind of the failure to release an egg, and you have a little bit higher testosterone. Higher testosterone doesn't need to be a negative towards girls. I think when they hear testosterone, which is the male predominant hormone, you can perceive that as a way to push yourself a little bit harder in the gym. You can perceive yourself of how I can be an extra little bit stronger and trying to get those gains a little bit more if you're into that side of stuff. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative. Treating weight loss or treating kind of PCOS, weight loss is encouraged, but it isn't the only thing. So I would encourage you to go to the doctor or a gyno to kind of make sure that everything's treated, everything's okay, because every single one of you guys is so different. There will be certain foods and certain like carbohydrates or fiber, some of that could potentially rise up your sugar levels, and then you'll have a massive crash. There's an amazing lady over in New Zealand called Claire Goodwin. She's known as the PCOS nutritionist. I was very fortunate to have her on the podcast, and she did a case study with one of her colleagues who has PCOS as well, and they were eating the same foods and they monitored their blood sugar levels, and one sugar level, so say one had a donut, one would be fine, but then the other one's blood sugar would go mental and their cravings would go mental as well. It can be a little bit harder to lose weight with PCOS. So say if you're someone who doesn't have PCOS and you are on 1600 calories and you're losing weight on 1600 calories, you may need to lower your calories a little bit more. Your metabolism may be a little bit slower, so it may take a little bit longer, but it's not impossible. You just have to be a little bit more patient.
Yeah.
It's not ideal because we all want results tomorrow. And if you've been yo-yo dieting for a lot of your life, you want results yesterday. What I would encourage is to do resistance training, which is weights training. I would also try to encourage a little bit of HIIT training, but you also need to identify your carbs, or not your carbs, your cravings. So we talk about that again with kind of the carbs, increasing your fruit and veg and identifying that. Potentially reducing your carbohydrates quite a lot. Not going keto, but quite lowering it a little bit can definitely help to kind of resolve those kind of massive spikes in sugar. But every single woman is different. One of the things that also happens is that the cycles can be very, very irregular. So you may not have a cycle for 8 weeks. It's very, very dependent. And one of the supplements that is recommended by Martin McDonald, and he doesn't recommend many supplements, so you kind of have to stand up and take notice of this one. It's called inositol. You normally take 2 grams to 4 grams a day, and it tastes like creatine. There's quite a bland taste to it, and you just put it in with water. It can improve cycle regularity. You can purchase, I would purchase Myo inositol rather than Cairo. It can improve insulin sensitivity, which will help to kind of deal with the kind of the carbohydrates and stuff like that. But I would definitely, with your nutrition, is definitely limit kind of the starchy carbs and aim for higher protein. That is going to keep you fuller for longer and will also help with kind of recovery from the gym and looking at yourself and kind of saying, right, go to the doctor if you feel you have any of those symptoms, because if you don't, you're not going to understand how to fuel your body. And if you think of your body like a car and you're trying to fuel it with unleaded petrol and it's a diesel car, it ain't going to run properly. You're not going to be able to function, and you only have one body. If you don't look after yourself, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to manage to what you want to do.
Yeah, it's such a challenge for females. Like some of the things they have to put up with, and then you've got the media to add on top of that. And I recently saw, if I'm not mistaken, it's Gemma Collins who came out and said she had PCOS. And that's one of the main reasons that she's been struggling over all the years. And like, it's such a challenge for females. But yeah, like to round this up, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I really, really appreciate you inviting me on, Connor. Really, really enjoyed having the chat and kind of getting rid of the myths and stuff like that. So I'm on Instagram, so at Shane Walsh Fitness. If you are interested in online coaching, head over to www.shanewalshfitness.com or slide into my DMs in a non-creepy way and head over to the Shane Walsh Fitness podcast if you want to hear kind of more about PCOS, the kind of the guests and stuff coming on, and Connor will be on as well if you guys want to hear that episode as well.
Yes, I will. Mate, honestly, you are a fountain of knowledge, and I have really appreciated you coming on here today. Thank you, everybody else, for listening. Make sure you go and check out Shane's podcast. Thank you for listening, guys, and have an amazing day.